Well, you are about to be part of an extraordinary experience. A journey into a bizarre world where young people, most of them girls, are bent on their own destruction, and one woman leads an inspiring battle to save their lives. It is the world of anorexia. What inner torment drives its thousands of victims to starve themselves, sometimes to death? How can their will to live be restored? Tonight, for the first time, you will see and truly understand.
I first reported on anorexia here on 2020 back in 1980. And then, as now, the treatment focused on convincing the patient to eat. But tonight, we're going to show you a unique new treatment. And because it gives such startling insights into the human mind, we've decided to devote an hour to it. Lynn Scher brings you haunting images of unimaginable despair.
When I was about 16, I weighed 65 pounds. I had many doctors tell me, you know, you're going to die. And say to my mother, you know, to her face, in 2 weeks she's dead. So, you know, kiss your daughter goodbye.
The hospitals, they'll get your weight up. They won't do anything about your mind. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Like, it's hell. It is hell.
It just scared me so much because this had become my life. I just thought that anorexia is me and that's who I am.
The hospitals didn't help me at all. They didn't help me one bit. They were holding tanks and they kept me alive until Peggy came along and saved me.
In Victoria, Canada, there is a house known simply as the Mansion. Inside, the walls are lined with portraits of medical castaways, all victims of severe eating disorders. Their doctors and hospitals had written them off for dead, and they probably would be if they hadn't found this woman, Peggy Claude-Pierre.
Why do people send their kids to you? As a last hope. I'm sort of the witch doctor, I think, in the world. I am. Hi, kiddo.
For the last decade, Claude-Pierre has been the voice of comfort and reason, providing alternative treatment to more than 400 patients, mostly young women, suffering from acute anorexia and bulimia.
How did breakfast go this morning?
Her approach is intensely personal, and her center has become a sanctuary to victims poorly served by traditional methods.
Sweetheart, I'll never let you down, okay? This is a really complex and very devious, deep mindset. A victim's mind is able to construct such negativity against themselves so that the patient actually has a civil war going on in her head.
It makes you feel bad when you eat.
After you eat, what does it do to make you feel badly, darling?
It says you're fat.
I blame no institution for their inabilities to cope with this condition. Hello? Hello, Dr. Minas?
The calls for help come from around the world.
Did it start off as bulimia, or did she lose weight?
But the scenario is always the same.
And what is her weight presently?
A desperate parent or doctor looking for any way to keep an anorexic from dying.
Three times suicide attempts?
In this case, the patient is already a casualty of a system where high relapse rates lead to multiple hospitalizations. A system unable to prevent thousands of lives from being lost.
She's in trouble.
11 years ago, Peggy Claude-Pierre knew nothing about anorexia. She was separated from her first husband, raising 2 teenagers on her own and working towards her doctorate in psychology. Suddenly, her older daughter, Kirsten, then 15, began losing weight. In 3 months, Kirsten's weight plummeted from 120 to 80 pounds.
At the time, it was a high. It was so exciting. Every time I get on the scale, I was lower and lower, and it was just like, oh my God, I'm getting slimmer. That's good. But still, there was never a point where I was slim enough.
When professional help didn't work, Kirsten listened to her mother and was turned around in 3 months. Then anorexia struck again. This time it was Kirsten's 13-year-old sister, Nicole.
I tried many psychiatrists. I tried calling clinics worldwide, and the answer was always the same. She will be a statistic within months.
I was worried my heart would stop.
So I went to the fridge and got a strawberry or something and hoped that would keep me through the night. But even after whatever I ate at midnight or 2 in the morning, I would still exercise in bed.
I knew that what was in front of me wasn't my daughter, but I knew that she could live, and I knew this was a psychological disorder, and I had to learn about it to turn her around.
So for the next year and a half, Claude-Pierre observed everything her daughter did to try to find any way to save her.
She'd run for 8 hours a day and walk and find a collapse in somebody's yard.
And you would be right behind her?
And I used to pick her up and carry her home. I never knew when I picked her up that she would still be alive.
Back then, no one knew the exact cause of anorexia. They still don't. But Peggy Claude-Pierre believes it comes from the unattainable effort to make everything right in their lives. Problems with the family, for instance. Anorexics, she says, are perfectionists, worried about everyone else, not themselves. And when they realize they can't fix everything, well, then they begin to feel worthless. That negative self-image is so vicious, so destructive, so powerful, that victims simply stop eating. To us, it seems like a vanity issue. They want to lose weight. But Claude-Pierre says anorexia is really an unconscious attempt at suicide because victims don't believe they deserve to live. Intuitively, Claude-Pierre realized that her daughter could never be left alone.
Everything she did to herself, I realized, had a common thread of no self-respect. Nicole used to go around every day using every decanter in my house with a little note saying, Nicole doesn't deserve to live. Nicole needs to die.
Writing, I am a fat pig, and don't you forget it.
Anything to degrade themselves.
She was watching her daughter starve to death. Anguished, Claude-Pierre figured out the only solution. She would coax her daughter into eating again by distracting her negative thoughts with constant praise and unconditional love, 24 hours a day.
At night, midnight, I'd hear my mom crying and sort of letting down her guard because she had had such a rough week with me. The torture, the waiting.
How did you know your daughter was beginning to turn around?
She began to smile again, but it took months. She probably didn't show that till after a full year.
You didn't get a smile out of your daughter for 1 year?
At least.
How did you feel when you saw that smile?
I can't talk about it very easily.
It must have been the most awful experience for you.
Yeah. It was the most awful experience for them.
What's the prognosis for your daughters?
There's no problem.
I never think about it. I eat whatever I want, whenever I want. Especially now, because I'm pregnant.
You saved your daughter's life.
I never thought of giving up. It never even occurred to me. While there was any breath left in me, there would be in her. But the suffering that they go through is something that nobody can really relate to.
Hello, Peggy. It's Dr. Lori McFarland calling. Hi, Peggy. This is Katie. Please give me a call. Hi, Peggy. It's Karim.
Word of her success spread quickly, and she started an outpatient service.
They won't admit her because she's not critical enough at 80-something pounds?
Parents, patients, and physicians realized they could always find a sympathetic voice at the other end of the telephone.
Oh, that's excellent.
For years, Claude-Pierre and her husband David Harris brought dozens of dying children into their home. Then 2 years ago, they bought this house and started the Montreaux Counseling Center, a small medically supervised clinic.
How many are living here now?
I think we have 8 at the moment in this residence.
Unlike other programs, the key here is one-on-one care, around the clock.
Hello, knock, knock.
No patient is ever left alone, thanks to a team of 5 care workers for each anorexic, trained to bring constant comfort. This woman has been extremely suicidal.
Are you happy living here? Yeah? Good. That's good news, Pooja.
I had had so many people tell me I was crazy and I would never get better, and that the best I could do in this lifetime was to cope.
Mackenzie Stroh was treated by Claude-Pierre 4 years ago and has never had a relapse.
I didn't think she could get me better, but have somebody say, well, I know what's going on in your head, and you can't get past me, this is so reassuring.
Like all patients, Mackenzie was asked when she first arrived to paint a picture of anorexia. For Claude-Pierre, it was a window to her mind.
It was forever nighttime in her mind. She was pouring out her life's blood.
But now I see the hollow cheeks and the ribs here.
And yet, look at the size of the thighs. She didn't know if she was fat or thin.
That's terrifying.
I'd have a lot of voices in my head telling me what to do, telling me not to eat, that I couldn't trust these people, that I had to exercise. And it was just like having actual people inside your head telling you things and telling you how you felt and how bad you were.
It's voices telling them that they're unworthy and directing them to hurt themselves. Many of my patients in the acute stage have tried to burn themselves in showers. They've tried to jump over balconies. They'll cut themselves. There is a negative mindset that convinces them that they have to die.
Is it reasonable to ask, are the voices real?
Are they happening? They're real to them. So that makes them very real. What do you remember feeling when you went to bed at night, darling? Did you get good sleeps?
I was always hungry.
Did you try to go downstairs into the kitchen and look for food, sweetheart?
Sometimes.
And what happened when you got in the kitchen?
I would just go back to bed.
In her therapy sessions, she lays the groundwork to restore a patient's self-worth. 15-year-old Sarah Jurgensen weighed 69 pounds when she came directly from a hospital.
Do you remember, Sarah, when you went into hospital the first time? Did you know why you were going into hospital, darling?
Because they wanted me to gain weight.
Was that frightening to you? Yeah. And how did you feel?
I didn't want to go.
So what happened at the hospital, darling?
They just put me in the psychiatric ward.
And what happened in the psychiatric ward? Who was in there?
No one.
How did that make you feel?
Awful.
Why, darling?
Because I thought they thought I was crazy.
Did you know you weren't crazy, darling? Did you tell them you weren't? And what did they say when you said that?
Nothing.
Nothing? What about the food, sweetheart?
They fed me things like roast beef and sausages. I'm a vegetarian.
One of the common things that institutions do unwittingly is to tell people that if they eat this food, it'll help fatten them up, and then they can be released. I mean, that's totally counterproductive.
What's wrong with trying to fatten somebody up who weighs 58 or 60 pounds?
The term fattening somebody up is the worst thing you can say to an anorexic. It's suddenly giving them worth in the world's eye when they have no worth in themselves. So unless they are psychologically ready to accept their worth, they are not psychologically ready to accept weight gain.
But isn't it just instinctive when you see somebody malnourished to want to give them food?
Give them food is one thing, but to talk to them at the same time and coax them to their worth is as important. Come on, Angel. That's a girl.
Sweetheart, you're safe here. Completely safe here.
Sweetheart.